daughter, and you're watching Chattin' with Janine, Part 2 with Representative Michael Yabubovich. Michael, welcome back. It feels like I just talked to you a minute ago.
That is correct. Thank you.
Well, I was fascinated by what you were saying, and I looked up at the clock and saw we were out of time. But let's continue our talk and talk about the freedom of information, the First Amendment, and Chernobyl, and everything else that we had on our notes.
Yes, let's do that. So I come from the Soviet Union, born and raised in Belarus, one of the republics, one of the 15 republics of the monolithic state. By the time I was born, I was just explaining to Janine, we went through 3 generations of oppression. My grandparents were born under communism, so socialist communism, my parents and myself. And the state controlled everything from pretty much cradle to grave. All your life was within the state. It was not, you could not escape it. You couldn't move anywhere. And so going back, so the First Amendment, freedom of information, freedom of speech and freedom of information. The First Amendment, I break it into 2 parts, freedom of speech and freedom of information. So information was all controlled. It was censored by the Soviet regime. The only information we had was out of newspapers. TV, there were like 2 TV channels in my time. All of that was state-produced. It was propaganda by the state, about the state, for the state. You could not get anything else. People could talk to themselves, amongst themselves. In my years, it was the softer part of socialism. People were not taken away in the middle of the night to gulags for making a joke about the leaders, but you wouldn't want to speak about anything openly. The only way we would get news about the outside world or news about our own lives that was not told by the state, well, the 2 ways. One was samizdat, which is written, hand-copied articles, novels.
Can you say
Samizdat. Samizdat, it's...
Sammy's dot?
Yeah, that's a Russian word, but
Oh.
It's handwritten, hand-copied novels, say, of Solzhenitsyn or somebody else, or articles that people would copy by hand and distribute among themselves because printing technology, copying technology, Xerox machines did not exist. Actually, at my father's plant, he worked in a factory. He said the only Xerox machine they had within the building was under lock and key and was guarded by KGB agents, because dissemination of information that goes in opposition to this state-mandated view was illegal, very much illegal. Anti-Soviet propaganda was punishable, criminal.
Can I just ask a couple questions because I'm curious? Did you have a refrigerator?
Yes.
Did you have a pet? Did you have
We
dogs?
did not, no. We lived in
What
an
about
apartment.
a car?
Car? No. No. Pretty much nobody had a car. The cost of a car was probably $3,000.
Yeah, I'm
I
surprised
would
that
say-
you had a refrigerator though. And in
Yes.
Cuba, if somebody has a refrigerator, it's very, very old, and if they have one at all, and the cars are all very, very old.
The Soviet Union was a bigger country, so everything was locally produced. So we had refrigerators that were made in the Soviet Union.
And
The
they
plant
worked?
economy, yeah, they worked. They
Okay.
arrived at the refrigerator, but so we had a refrigerator. Even TVs were made by locally. They did cost a lot of money, especially color TV. But so I think we had TV. Cars, no. You couldn't really save the money for a car. Most people couldn't. Plus, there was always shortages, so you would have to be in a line for a car maybe for a decade. It would be much better to receive a phone, a landline, because sometimes you would have phones for a building, one landline for a building.
And under a communist system, what's it like to go to the grocery store?
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, the grocery store. So you would go there and you would hope they would have, I don't know, sour cream or something like that. When we arrived here, I was amazed that you have 7 different versions of sour cream. Like in our day, we would have 2 different versions, sour cream or no sour cream on the day. And then you would have milk, you would have, I don't know if we would have eggs all the time, potatoes. People, sometimes outside of the cities, people had plots of land. They would grow potatoes, they would grow, like ourselves and our relatives. We would grow food and store it for the winter. Like potatoes was the easiest ones. Strawberries sometimes. So you wouldn't rely on food being available. Bread, I think most of the time bread was there, but sugar, for example, in the late 80s disappeared
No sugar.
for months, no sugar. So you would get these coupons that would tell you you're eligible to receive 1 kilo of sugar for your family. And you would use those coupons in addition to money to get your sugar, whatever, a bag of sugar.
Wow.
So toilet paper we hadn't seen for years. So newspaper Pravda was great for replacement.
Okay, I don't have to ask the question, then you answered.
But that was, years. So you would get a subscription to the Pravda newspaper, and then you're good to go.
That's good for. Pravda, I think we talked about part one. Pravda
you
is
do
the
have to
news
wrinkle
source.
it. I mean,
Yeah.
I hope we don't
that's
get there,
good to
but
know. If we wrinkle it up.
you got to
Okay,
wrinkle it
so
up.
it makes it a little
Yes,
softer.
That's right. Yeah, that's the best kind. Yeah. So you didn't really have choices. So freedom comes from choices. So we didn't really have choices. Not where to work, not where to do, not what to think, not what to read, or information to receive. So, in my day, what was prevalent was this like a mesh, like a bag made of mesh that you could crumple and put in your pocket, and you would always have it with you, because you never know what you're going to come across. If you see a line of people going around the block, you don't care what's in it. You get in line, and you ask what is being distributed, what is being given away, and you would just stay there and hope to get to the front of the line and receive whatever it was. Maybe it was shoes, maybe it was bread, maybe it was meat, maybe it was fruit, maybe it was something else, some kind of musical record. You would pull out your meshed bag and you would load up whatever you could get and go home. Pay for it. So everybody had those bags. They were called a just-in-case bag. Because you always have it in your pocket.
A needed item available, whereas in a free world, you can just go anywhere in any store and there'd be many choices.
That's right. But here you would hope to find a line, and you get in line.
This is why we fight for freedom.
Very much so. Very much so. So nowadays, what scares me a lot is the propaganda machine, the propaganda coming from the state. Obviously, everybody has access to the internet still. We have access. I don't know, TV. I don't watch TV, but so people can still find the information they want. And in the Soviet Union, so there was another source of information. That was the shortwave radios, with the broadcast signals sent by Voice of America radio station, the United States government in Russian, BBC Russian, Department of. They would broadcast signals into the Soviet Union so people could listen to what they had to say. Sometimes music, Radio Free Europe in Russian.
I've heard that. I've heard of that.
Yep. So we had shortwave radios. We could tune in into those stations and listen, and we would receive news from abroad about the outside life, but also internal life in the Soviet Union. But those were jammed. The Soviet government could not allow independent source information to get in, so they had jamming stations throughout the Soviet Union that would try to jam the signal, introduce noise into their shortwave radio signal. So we'd always have to tune and retune to trying to capture the bits and pieces. I mean, this is horrendous but this is the life we had. We didn't have really much choices to have a different life, but this is unnatural, very unnatural. Now I realize how stupid or how evil it was that the information was being suppressed like that.
Yeah. So you were talking about the First Amendment, and you break it into two. So freedom of
access to information.
Access to information.
Now, the freedom of speech, being able to speak your mind, that's the easy part. In the Soviet Union, you didn't.
You have an opinion, you keep it to yourself.
You keep it to yourself because you know what would happen. You self-center. You don't express it because you know what happens if you do. So you pretty much raised to keep it all to yourself, to not speak of anything you think of.
Have you ever experienced that as a kid? Some kid just was having a bad day and exploded and screamed, and what happened?
I haven't seen that. And again, in my years, it was not the Stalin era of purges anymore. So probably not that much would have happened to a little kid. But pretty much nobody spoke up.
I remember reading about that in the 80s, how it was so quiet. Somebody went and visited Russia, and it was just so quiet because people are afraid. They just live in fear all the time. You say anything against the state, and you're gone.
You're gone. So yeah, you could, only among friends you could speak about it.
If you
really
can trust
eat.
your
If you,
friends.
yeah,
you
that's
know,
right. That's
that
right.
They don't turn on you.
Not to foreigners, because every foreigner had a KGB escort. A couple of people always with them.
And I'm sure
Pretty
they
filtered.
they were very careful when what they showed the visitors.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So I remember myself playing with the shortwave radio, trying to, music was nice. Western music was, we were getting through, and news. So 1986, I was in 8th grade, April. So it was a very hot summer, and in May 1st, is the, what is it, Workers' Day parade. So everybody, throughout the Soviet Union, everybody gets out, holds, red flags, celebrate the proletariat, Workers' Day. So it's a big deal. You don't really have a choice not to go to it. So we were marching in the courtyard, like in preparation for May 1st of the school. We were holding whatever our little banners there, starting in April, late April. And then one of those days, trying to listen into the outside information, I heard about Chernobyl.
Oh yes, that was on our notes. Yeah.
On those shortwave radios. So
That was
April
1986.
1986, April 26th, the Chernobyl nuclear reactor blew up. They didn't tell us for 2 weeks.
Really?
The Soviet government didn't tell us for 2 weeks.
How far away were you from that?
200 miles.
Oof.
And we were going, getting ready for the parade for the May 1st again, outside, very hot summer. I remember it. The sun was very hot. Maybe it wasn't the sun. But we were outside marching in preparation. Everybody went to the May 1st parade. Only about a week later after that did we learn that the nuclear station blew up.
So that was April. So I had a newborn baby, my first baby, and my sister was almost due. I remember being hearing about that and thinking, wondered if she was, because she lived closer to Russia than we do. I was worried about her.
Yeah, right.
Like the fallout, because that was what everybody talked about was nuclear fallout.
But they didn't tell us. So there's the mini-series Chernobyl that came out a couple years ago. It's very true. They cut the phone lines to the town where it happened. They locked up all the people. They moved them in bulk elsewhere.
Yes.
So that information would not get out, because it doesn't look good for the Soviet government that they allowed for this to happen. So
and that was that was the most serious disaster. I have it in my notes because I talked about on the first show. I went to an energy conference, and I brought home a stack of books and been reading them all, and this whole notepad is filled up with notes, and I did write about that, Chernobyl.
But this is the information, because this is danger to people. They didn't care. Yeah. Whatever looks good at the state level.
Yeah, so people don't count. It's the state and how they look.
And then that summer, relatives would send their kids up away from the Chernobyl. So a couple of kids lived with us. We were 200 miles away, but they lived right there.
You weren't related to them? They were just random kids?
No, the relatives.
Okay.
Somebody, but kids my age were sent up because they wanted to get them out of the zone. People who lived there, closer to it, wanted, because right on the border of Belarus and Ukraine is where the Chernobyl station is, and I was in the center of Belarus, like 200 miles away. So 200 miles away is better than 10 miles away, so they would send kids up, and the kids stayed with us over the summer, and maybe they moved elsewhere after that.
Did you
trying to escape.
See signs of fallout? Like, there was a movie that came out in the 80s, The Day After. It was called The Day After. I was in high school. and it was like snowing. It was like this white ash all over, and people got cancers. And
so nothing. And the horrible thing again is them not telling us. They knew about it right away, but they didn't tell anybody. And the only way we learned about it was from BBC or Voice of America or Radio Europe or shortwave radios, because one of the stations, whatever, nuclear monitoring stations in Sweden or Finland picked up this radiation cloud, and they thought that there was a local explosion.
Wow.
And they broadcast around the world, and everybody learned about it. Not us.
Mm-hmm.
Not us right next to it.
Wow.
That's how the world knew.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, so with that happened was the reactor had a runaway chain reaction and disassembled, breaching all containment. So 50 people were killed initially during the event in the firefighting efforts. The radioactive material was comparable to an atomic bomb released into the environment. So the fallout most likely responsible for 4,000 deaths, but then you
I would say hundreds of thousands were affected.
And we would compare that to
deformed births and shortened lives and all sorts of diseases.
I mean, I remember growing up hearing about 3 Mile Island. Well, that happened in '79, so I was a big kid. It was a core meltdown caused by failure in the cooling system. It was a $1 billion reactor that was lost, but the containment system worked, and there were no human fatalities and no significant environmental impact. And then Fukushima in 2011, that was caused by, there was an earthquake and then the tsunami.
Yeah.
And they built it, the buffeting. They didn't have, the buffeted the facility was 50 feet, so the 50 feet waves came over, and 3 of the 6 reactors were in trouble. Yeah, I remember hearing about this. The 2 reactors that were fine were built further up, but they had the other cooling systems down lower, and that was too close. It was too low. If they were higher up, and it would have been fine.
Would have been fine, yeah.
Yeah.
I believe technologically, I think the problems of reactors or of the containment is solvable. You know, going back to Chernobyl, that's 80s, 40-year, 50-year-old technology built under the rule of the central planners.
Yeah, the central planners.
Because whatever they say goes, even though it could be engineering insanity. But I think it could be solved now, and that's probably the best and the cleanest and the purest source of energy nowadays.
It is, and people are worried about CO2. There's no CO2 emissions from nuclear energy, and you can power up the whole country.
Yeah, with those little things, provided the containment is the initial thought when you build it, not an afterthought. Like in Chernobyl, they contained it, but that was probably 10 years later that they built the whatever they call it. The
sarcophagus?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, the enclosure over it, finally to contain it. But in the 90s, they built it, I think.
And they have the technology now to recycle and reuse the spent nuclear rods.
That's what I hear, yeah. Different kinds of reactors could reuse them. So, yeah, I would want efforts to go into that because that's the cleanest source of energy.
It is, and it's powerful, very, very powerful.
Yes.
It's more powerful than anything else that we have.
Yeah, per probably density of energy, small volume, you have a lot of energy in there.
I have 2 different sections of notes on Chernobyl. So that was the first section. The other section, I got kind of lost in my notes here because I had more written down about those, the cooling.
The mechanism.
Yeah, mechanisms for Fukushima.
Yeah, there was a mini-series about it in the last couple of years from, I think, British, the Chernobyl. It was good. It showed you life in the Soviet Union. You may want to, just watch that. It would show you the leaders, what they did. It shows Gorbachev there for a little bit.
Yeah, I remember a comedian saying, "You know what's scary? That thing on Gorbachev's head."
Oh yeah, that was retouched. We didn't see that in newspapers. Every newspaper, yes.
We all saw it and you didn't see it? That's interesting.
I don't know how it looked on TV, I don't remember, but every newspaper would print it without that thing.
Wow.
It would, yeah. They would fix his image in every newspaper, every print of him.
There's a very famous photograph of him meeting Ronald Reagan, and it's cold over there, and Gorbachev was all bundled up in his coat, and Ronald Reagan went out in his suit and just shook his hand. That was a very powerful picture of Ronald Reagan that can brave the cold and go meet the ruler of the Soviet Union. But glasnost, that was his word?
Yes,
and that was, what does that mean, glasnost?
Freedom of speech.
And
freedom,
it seemed like that's when things started to get better.
They opened up, late 80s, it started opening up, obviously. 91, the Soviet Union dissolved. It went into separate states, 15 separate states, Russia being one. And for a little while, like Russia, I look at Russia, Belarus never had any freedoms ever since then, really. A strong man came to power, and he's still there since 94, pretty much.
Wow.
So they never had anything. But in Russia, for a little while, they had freedom of speech. To me, it's very important to have freedom of speech both ways, access to information, be able to criticize your rulers, ridicule even your rulers, criticize the state, criticize the government, criticize the powerful. I mean, you can always criticize those you can oppress, that's easy, but can you criticize the powerful, the people who stand above you, people who govern you.
Being part of the government or state representatives, we get our share of criticism.
And but that's great to see. It's when they cannot speak to us, we cannot call us out. That's where the trouble starts.
I went overseas this summer and I stayed with a Russian family. So I tried, Доброе утро, is that, or
Доброе утро.
Did I say that right? Good morning?
Good
and
morning.
then I know dos podanias, goodbye, and
Goodbye.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. And how do you say you're welcome?
Пожалуйста.
I don't think we got around to it. We would talk to each other through the translator. And one of them, he ran with me, so I didn't have to run by myself. And by the last day I was there, I knew the whole city by myself. I could go out.
Oh, wow.
And I wasn't afraid. I really liked it over there.
Oh, it's a beautiful country, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's warm and a lot of produce.
And I looked up their town where they live, and there's no houses. There's no houses. It's just
apartments?
all big block housing like what they keep building in Merrimack and everywhere else.
Huh.
I'm like, oh, wow. And how much are they charging for rent? And rent just keeps going up and up and up.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I just want to stay in my house. I like where I live.
Yeah, I'm sure it's nice, but yeah, it's...
Did you live in a house when you
No, an apartment. We initially, so I don't know where my parents lived before I was born, but when I was born, we had somehow they got an apartment that we shared with just one family, one other family.
You had to share your apartment with another family?
Well, just one family, so that was good. And after a while, they got
What do
their
you
own.
mean? There was people that had to share several families in one?
It was in the city. It was city apartment. Come on.
Yeah.
Jeanine.
It was really small. I know, but people need to hear this because there are people we have kids growing up today that have absolutely no idea about the Soviet Union and communism.
It's shortages. It's central planning. It's shortages of everything. It was not important to give people places to live because they couldn't get it on their own. They couldn't. So ownership was. We owned nothing. Ownership, really, private property didn't exist in the Soviet Union.
What about clothes? Did you have well, you didn't have church because they outlawed religion, so you didn't have
nice
Sunday clothes?
No. You would have clothes you would have clothes. Hand me down sometimes, sometimes.
And where'd you get your clothes? You can't just go into the store and pick them off a rack.
You would get them sometimes in stores, but not every time. So you wouldn't have huge wardrobes. You would just have some clothes, and that's about it. If you had more money, you could try to find something on the black market, something brought in from the West, but most people didn't have any money to talk about. And then,
Did you wear uniforms to school?
Yes, those existed.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess that was the...
And how often did you get a new pair of shoes?
I wouldn't know. Probably not every year. But kids growing up would have something, But
were the shoes hand-me-downs?
That would be difficult, I think, because most people wore their shoes all throughout, not sneakers. No, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What about sports? Did you have sports in school?
Sports. Outside, we played soccer. In school, I don't believe they don't have sports. Yeah, we had some kind of a gym, chin-ups, things like that. Oh,
but like the Olympiads, they're amazing. They're really good. I love the ice skating.
Oh yeah. There was a swimming pool in a nearby school, so I would swim there.
Did you see those Russian girls that were the ice skaters from the last Olympics? They were amazing. They were absolutely amazing. And then they were saying that we probably won't see them in the next Olympics. They have other girls coming. I'm like, well, what can they do? It's just they must levitate because these girls, I've never seen anything like that. They did little spins with one arm in the air, two arms in the air, jumping and spinning. I'm like, how do they do that?
Oh, in the last few grades of high school, we had the military training. So I think just the boys. I don't think the girls were there.
Are you forced to go in the military?
It's like one of the classes, so we would have an AK. We would get an AK, reassemble, disassemble, who is faster, who can load the magazine quicker.
That's a helpful skill.
Yes, but we would never see an AK later on until we get into the armies. And nobody would possess, there was no firearm possession of any kind. Maybe hunting rifles, maybe someplace, but AKs didn't work.
Crime? What's the crime like?
So there are different levels. In the 90s, when it all fell apart, the crime was very high.
And you had no way to defend yourselves because
back then,
no one has a gun.
I didn't live through it in the 90s, but that was when the mafia organized mafias existed, then they merged with the state, pretty much, 90s was the wild years, but in the 80s crime existed, but probably low-level criminals, but we were very poor, so we were not a target of criminals, but criminals existed, organized crime was there. They ran, I guess, underground black market. I'm not sure what, casinos, maybe some black market trade, but again, we were not targeted because we had no money, nothing. Most people had nothing. So they would probably control that kind of industries. But guns, I'm not sure I've seen guns before then. Like the AKs we had in school didn't work, didn't function. They were just there to work on, to train. So crime existed, I guess, muggings, things like that, but just low level, very low level. Again, we were not the target then anyway.
We have 2 minutes left. We just talked up now. It's really interesting to talk to you. I know you're state rep when we vote the same. We are big Liberty reps and good conservatives, but you have a very interesting story.
But we got to defend it. I'm always amazed that people that don't have my experience, didn't live, well, luckily, through socialism or generational oppression, they still value liberty, like yourself, Jeanine, because I'm amazed that you didn't have to live through it, but you still understand what it will be if you lose it.
It's because I've been reading since I was old enough to read. I've been reading history, and I know. So when I see these things happening, I get really scared because I know it's coming, and we have to fight.
Yeah. We have kids, we have family. It's just, or humanity needs to be, saved from that kind of oppression, level of oppression. Freedom should exist someplace, because right after America, I don't know what else is there.
There's nothing else. There's nothing else. So. Yeah, it's a republic if you can keep it. We have just 30 seconds left,
right,
so I just want to thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Michael Yabubovich from Hooksett, my colleague in the New Hampshire State House. Been very interesting talking to you. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Thank you.
And I'll be back on the air. I'm taping new shows again. Sorry, I've had a long break. And I had this little blue light here on the past 2 shows just to a tribute to that little boy from Merrimack who was killed. It was very sad, and he touched all of our hearts, and nothing like that should ever happen to a child. So God bless you, and I guess Happy New Year at this point, huh?
Happy Thanksgiving.